the title of the documentary is AKA Jane Roe. Now, if you don't know anything about that, Jane Roe is the fictitious name given to the plaintiff in the Roe versus Wade decision that was handed down in 1973 by the United States Supreme Court that decriminalized abortion in the first trimester of pregnancy. And Jane Roe was the so-called poster child of the pro-abortion movement up until that point. And she signed on to this infamous decision that was handed down by the U.S. Supreme Court. But several years after, 1995, Jane Roe converted to Christianity. She was baptized in Dallas, Texas, and refuted her positions on abortion and became pro-life. And so over the some 22 or more years since that time, she has been a strong pro-life advocate. And how do I know that? Well, first of all, I knew Norma McCorvey, which is her real name. I knew Norma McCorvey right after her conversion in 1995 when she came to Columbus, Ohio, with the Reverend Flip Benham, the person that actually baptized her in Dallas. And also, I've read this book, which is called Won by Love. It's the story of Jane Roe, that is Norma McCorvey. And in this book, it talks about her journey from pro-choice to pro-life, from non-believer to a Christian. And since her conversion in 1995, she's been a strong pro-life advocate. But, so we all know that, right? Until this documentary is coming out by FX, in which they supposedly get Jane Roe on her deathbed saying that she was not pro-life. She was paid to make these statements that she was pro-life. She was never pro-life, and she was used by the pro-life movement. So we're here to refute those lies today, because that's what they are. They're bald-faced lies that are being perpetrated against Norma McCorvey, who passed away, unfortunately, in 2017. And so the pro-life movement is marshaling all its resources to refute this. And we're going to be talking about that today with my good friend and colleague, Father Frank Pavone from Priests for Life. But before we do that, before we turn to Father Frank, what I'd like to do is go way back in time here. 1995, I want to play two video clips or audio, depending on where you're listening, on Nightline with Ted Koppel. Remember that show? It came on at midnight every night. And in 1995, right after Jane Roe, that is Norma McCorvey, converted to Christianity and refuted her pro-choice position, she came on Nightline and was interviewed by Ted Koppel. So let's go ahead and play that first clip now. This first clip, she was asked by Ted Koppel if she had been used by the pro-abortion movement. Go ahead and play that clip.
Present what might be, I mean, I doubt very much that you'll ever hear this in public from them, but what might be their point of view. Okay. You're not, and you've just sort of outlined the reasons yourself when you talk about your own background, you're not exactly the ideal role model, right?
Right.
So are you surprised that they didn't choose then to invite you to sort of put you up front and say, here's our poster gal?
Let me explain to you this other way, Ted. And back in 1969, when I lied and I told Sarah Weddington and Linda Coffey that I had been raped, I did that out of pure desperation. I wanted to have an abortion. I saved up my rent money. I went to an illegal abortion clinic here in Dallas, Texas. I saw the conditions of that clinic. I saw the dry blood on the floor. I saw all the roaches and all the other creepy things crawling around the floor. The only thing that stopped me was the fact that the clinic had been busted a week before that. That was the only thing that stopped me.
Yeah, ironically,
Go
you
ahead
never had
and
an
stop
abortion,
there, Mr. Producer. She goes on to talk about how she never had an abortion, which is something very few people actually know about Norma McCorvey. Now, the second clip here, Ted Koppel asks her about her conversion and then the concerns that he has that she might be used by the pro-life movement. And of course, she refutes that and never was. So go ahead and play that clip.
I don't think that the movement is the issue here. I believe, Ted, that the issue here is that I have found a spiritual path that is concrete and with Jesus Christ, and I feel very comfortable with that. And I'm doing this for me. I'm not doing it for anyone else. I'm just watching out for my own self.
Let me turn the question around a little bit. What if now the right to life movement were to say, you see, now she has finally realized the error of her ways, although you still seem to have some ambiguity of thinking toward abortion. But what if they tried to turn you into some kind of a symbol? What if they tried to use you now the way that some people feel you were used by the choice movement before?
We've already talked about that at great length, and there will not be any exploitation of my political status.
Who's we?
The right to life people.
They have spoken to you about this, or you? Who approached whom here?
Well, it was just like a general conversation that Flip and I were having one morning in Operation Rescue's office.
I'm sorry, who's Flip?
Flip Brenham is the National Director of Operation Rescue Dallas.
And how did you come to meet him?
I met him years and years ago in front of the abortion clinics, of course, when they would come and protest in front of the clinics. And we were arch enemies. I mean, we never spoke a kind word to each other at all. And one morning he came over and he told me, he says, Norma, he says, do you know that God is pro-choice? And I looked at him and I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, he says, God is pro-choice, but he wants that everyone should choose life. And then he showed me the scripture, and he read it to me from the Bible. And that got me to thinking.
All right, so end it there. Thank you for that. Again, this is Norma McCorvey speaking in 1995 on the TV program Nightline, where she talks about her conversion to Christianity, her conversion through the pro-life position, and then discussing her future as a pro-life advocate. And so what we want to do today, we want to talk about this movie or this documentary put on by FX, which will be released tomorrow, called AKA Jane Roe, which supposedly demonstrates at some level that that Norma McCorvey was not pro-life, that she was paid to do this stuff. And so what I wanted to do today was bring on my good friend and colleague, Father Frank Pavone, who knew Norma McCorvey for 22 years, who baptized her into the Catholic Church and even spoke to her on the day of her death in 2017. Father Frank, thanks for being on the program.
Hello, Mark. It's a joy to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you. And Father Frank, I can't think of a better person to bring on to talk about Norma McCorvey. You had a relationship with her for a very long time. If you would, just let's start out there. You met her, you knew her. Talk about the Norma McCorvey you knew.
I met her right after she was baptized. In fact, on the day she was baptized there in 1995, I got a fax from our friends at the Dallas pro-life groups saying, Norma's being baptized tonight. So shortly after that, I visited with her in Dallas, and we really became like siblings. I mean, we communicated with each other constantly over those 22 years, visited with each other constantly. And we were not engaged only in the public professional, pro-life activities, but, she would come to events like my anniversary of ordination celebrations. And when I was honored by various groups, I would often have Norma there. And she would, of course, meet the people who were there. But we traveled with her through every inch, and I mean literally, of her journey, the ups
Okay.
and the downs, helping her behind the scenes to find the right medical care, for example, assisting her when she had to move from one place to another to figure out how to make that work, assisting her in her pro-life activities. And I knew also when she was filming this documentary, in fact, I have hundreds of texts from her still on my phone. And I have one in particular that was talking about the day she started doing this interview. We can chat about that as we go along here.
Yeah.
But the point is, and that is the context of this whole thing, precisely is that we saw the whole picture. Anyone swooping in with a video camera, they're seeing a part of the picture. We knew her. We knew the whole picture. And, for anyone to come in and try to say it was different from what it was, especially when they don't ask us how it was, is a particularly offensive form of arrogance. But that relationship, as you said, lasted the rest of her life. And, leading up to her death, and of course, as you mentioned, on the very day that she died, communicating with her and hearing her, praying with her and hearing her say to me, and Janet Morana, our associate, was also a good friend of hers, saying to us, "You carry on, promise me that you're never going to stop working to reverse this terrible decision that I was part of."
Amen. My guest again is Father Frank Pavone from Priest for Life. You can find out more about the work of Priest for Life going to priestforlife.org. That's priestforlife.org. Father Frank, that Nightline video clip, that's way back. It was in the early stages of her story, her journey as a pro-life advocate, as a Christian, a believer in Christ. But she pretty much held to that throughout her entire life. What do you make of this so-called deathbed confession that the FX is supposedly going to expose in this new documentary, AKA Jane Roe?
Well, I'm going to be very interested to see. Of course, I haven't seen it yet. I don't think any of us have seen it yet. But the point is that, she was filming way before her death. I mean, this was the first text I got from her that said, "Hey, Father, this guy from Australia who's come down from New York is interviewing me today." That was in May of 2016.
Oh, okay.
She didn't die until February of 2017, as you know. This was over a period of months that she was getting interviewed, and by the way, being paid for it. Because she told me on that first day in that text, she said, "Oh yeah, this guy, I told him I was going to charge him, and he's going to give me, I'm going to have a good sum of money at the end, so I'm happy about that," she said in the text. And so right away, that raises questions of, is that journalism? But here's, let me put this in, again, I don't know what we're going to see from what's been claimed, she's going to say, "Oh, well, this was an act," and whatnot. Mark, you knew Norma. Many of us knew Norma.
Yeah.
Here's what we have to point out to people. We came to learn pretty quickly not to be surprised by anything that came out of the mouth of Norma McCorvey.
That's true. It was true.
Right?
Yeah. Very true.
Because here's how this woman was deeply damaged. And anyone who reads her book, not only Won by Love, but also her previous book, I Am Roe, when she was still on the other side, and it gives a good insight into the difficulties of her childhood and her young adulthood. But here's the point that we're making. We knew, if we heard Norma say, as we sometimes did, and again, I have the texts, I have the emails from her, as we sometimes heard her say, I've had enough with this movement. I'm not part of you people anymore.
Yeah. Well, I've said that a few times.
Right. That's how Norma expressed her frustration. Yeah. That's how she vented when she was depressed. And she was very frustrated very often with a lot of people and people in her family. I mean, I helped to navigate her through a lot of complex ups and downs with family members and with close friends and with ministry partners. I mean, we saw it all. And people have to understand, we came to know that this was the sometimes erratic, sometimes rebellious Norma McCorvey. And because it wasn't a snapshot, it wasn't an interview. We didn't hear,
Right.
we didn't come to know her because we listened to her speeches. We came to know her because in private and in public, in sadness and in joy, in the triumphs, in the defeats, when the cameras were on, when the cameras were off, we were by her side, and we always knew, no matter how high she went or how low she sunk, we always knew where she landed, and we knew what her core convictions were. Now, Mark, her core convictions were actually more pro-life than the pro-abortion leaders that drafted her as Roe of Roe v. Wade wanted them to be. Because on the night before, as you may recall from her book, the night before she was publicly revealed to be the Jane Roe, she said to pro-abortion leader and attorney Gloria Allred, who organized the press conference where this was announced, she turns to Gloria and she says, by the way, you know I think abortion is wrong.
Yep.
And Gloria was like, uh-oh, we better let that one just go by.
Right.
But this was the woman we're talking about. And she worked in the abortion facilities. You know what she did while she was working in the abortion facility? She was talking women out of their abortion. So it's not like a column that you check over here and then, I'm going to erase it. I'm going to check a column over there. That was not what this story was about. And it's not about competing press conferences or competing interviews. Oh, she said this in this interview, but I heard her say that in this one. No, you got to know the whole Norma, and you got to know the whole journey. And that's why, as I say again, it is offensive and it is arrogant for people to come along and say, oh, I saw that video clip. You see, they were all lying. That's just garbage.
That's garbage. That's right. I'm talking to Father Frank Pavone from Priest for Life. You can find out more from going to their website at priestforlife.org. Father Frank, when we talk about this new documentary, AKA Jane Roe, the producer, Rick Sweeney, I mean, there's no... we all understand where this person's coming from, their perspective. This person has put on films that talk about the LGBT, other kinds of really nefarious types of topics. A strong pro-abortion advocate, obviously with an axe to grind, I think, here. This is pure propaganda. Why do you believe or better said, do you think the documentary will damage the pro-life movement and our efforts to end abortion?
I don't think so, provided that we who knew Norma reassure our movement of what the facts were. In fact, we could turn this around and make it help the movement, and here's why. Norma became strongly pro-life, especially when she faced the reality of what an abortion is. And Mark, you're a great advocate of this and a great example of the need that we have to show the American people the gory, nature of abortion, challenge them to look at an aborted baby. Well, Norma had that terrible experience in these abortion facilities. And I mean, she got sick to her stomach, and she got morally perturbed by that, as anyone with a functioning conscience would get. And so what I'm saying is that if we come to know the Norma story, we're going to come to know also the story of what abortion is. And that's something that, we're always trying to get attention for the story of Norma. It's a powerful story in our movement. And this is a moment where we can once again go back to the core of that story, which is not simply who is Norma, but what is abortion. And another question too, what is Roe v. Wade? Because as you know, even many pro-life people across America, they still don't know what that decision said and how extreme the abortion policy is, namely throughout pregnancy, that this decision allowed to happen. And if we can use this as a moment where those two core questions, what is abortion and what is Roe v. Wade, can be again addressed, then at least for people of goodwill, it will advance our cause.
That's a good point. It doesn't seem like it's coincidental, let's say, the release of this documentary right in the midst of a presidential campaign, a presidential year, where the fate of the U.S. Supreme Court hangs in the balance when we're talking about the reelection of Donald Trump as president. We're talking about the possibility of Roe versus Wade being overturned and turned back to the state legislature. The timing is, like I say, it's no coincidence. And I think this, like you say, gives us an opportunity to talk about Roe, the deficiencies of Roe, why it needs to be overturned, should have never been handed down by the U.S. Supreme Court and left to the states to resolve. So obviously they've timed this, and probably, for the election. Father Frank, you signed on to this joint letter that I signed as well, that's been released today from dozens of pro-life leaders who knew Norma McCorvey. And I think that's a strong, very strong message. And we're asking, although we're unlikely to get it from the film producer, we're asking for all the footage to make sure that this wasn't just taken out of context. Again, we don't know exactly what the film depicts at the end, but of course, all the releases are on this whole supposed deathbed conversion, and that she was paid to say these things. We have a few minutes left, Father Frank. You knew her. I mean, when I read that, you spent 22 years knowing Norma, you took her through her spiritual and psychological healing process from her wounds and of her past. I mean, we all understand Norma's past was unfortunate in her lifestyle and all those things, and those don't go away. You were very much involved in her life. She wasn't just a poster child. She wasn't just put on a pedestal. There was much more to our relationship with her. We weren't about to take advantage of her. And she refuted that in the Nightline interview. If you would, deal with that one real quick. We got a minute. From your perspective, did the pro-life movement take advantage of Norma?
No. The pro-life movement brought her to healing. The pro-life movement respected her wishes at all times. Were there individual people that didn't realize that she needed more healing? I mean, there's always a temptation in any movement to say, oh, look, this person converted and so forth. But we interacted with a lot of folks in this. The movement is very big. And all the people we interacted with said, we want to do what's good for her, healing. And then she always called the shots. Norma, how much do you want to share? What do you want to say? What speaking engagements do you want to go on? And we facilitated that for her. And we had to spend a lot of time actually protecting her as well.
Well, unlike the pro-abortion movement that did try to take advantage of her. And she even talked about that in that Nightline interview early on, about how she was taken advantage of. And what I understand, although I didn't know her to the degree that you knew her, Father Frank, in no way did the pro-life movement take advantage of her. She did this out of her own will. She advocated for life. She advocated for the Christian religion. And we thank you for your testimony, Father Frank, and we pray that your voice be loud and clear in refuting the lies about the supposed deathbed conversion or admissions of Jane Roe. Folks, you've been listening to the Mark Harrington Show. Go to markharrington.org. We'll see you next time. God bless you, and God bless America. And remember, America, to bless God.
You've been listening to Mark Harrington, your radio activist. For more information on how to become a witness against the evil plague in America, call Created Equal at 614-269-7808. That's 614-269-7808. Or go online to createdequal.net. Createdequal.net. Be sure to tune to the Mark Harrington Show next time for your marching orders in the culture war.